the Christmas story? Who is it? No, I don't want you to hear me wrong. I didn't say a Christmas story. Who here loves the Christmas story? Like we're going to Bethlehem, Jesus in a manger. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree, Christmas story. Who's there? There we go. All right. Nice. Well, it's a classic, right? It's familiar to us. We come to church in December and we expect to hear the Christmas story. But I wonder, how well do we know this story? And don't worry, I'm not gonna pick anyone. I know some palms are getting sweaty, looking back to those like Sunday school quizzes that you all had. But I wanna just point out a couple of discrepancies that may be in our mind when it comes to the Christmas story. The first one, who here remembers how the shepherds followed a star to the baby Jesus? Who here remembers that, following a star to the baby Jesus? It might surprise you to find that the shepherds didn't see any star the night that Jesus was born. They were given another, much more difficult way to find Jesus, if I could say. They were supposed to find the baby Jesus as a child wrapped in cloths, lying in a manger. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but that would actually require kind of door to door, like, is there a baby here? Like, wrapped in cloth. I know that's rare. Maybe it's lying in a feeding trough or something. But they actually had to go seek it out, but no star. What about the three magi or kings or wise men, or I wish we could just settle on a title for these guys once and for all. These were the guys that actually followed the star. And they did, but who here knows that the magi, the wise men, the kings, whatever you call them, are the nicest parts of any nativity scene? Like they're the only ones like dressed in really nice, maybe even like a patterned cloth in that little statue. They're wearing the different kinds of crowns. They have different shaped boxes for whatever reason that they come. But they don't belong in a nativity scene, amen? Because we know that the magi, the wise men, the kings came months, if not years later. They weren't there with the shepherds. They probably weren't even there in Bethlehem. And there were three presents, not three people. There were probably like dozens of people in this caravan of magi and servants, whatever. But go back and read, I promise you, it's there. What about the villain of the Christmas story? Anybody know the villain of the Christmas story? I'm not talking about Herod. I'm not talking about Caesar. No, if you've seen a Christmas play, you know the villain of the Christmas story is the innkeeper who says, there is no room. And of course, that's the dream role because that's the only role with a line that they get to say in the whole story. Would it surprise you to find out there was no innkeeper? In fact, there probably wasn't even an inn. That's why, I know, I'm spoiling it. That's why our translations more commonly say like there's no lodging or no room or no rooms available. Wherever Mary and Joseph were staying, which was probably a relative's house, there wasn't room for them. There wasn't a room for them to stay in. So they had to stay downstairs with the animals where there would have been a manger that could double as a bassinet. So there was kind of a perk there to be had. But even as you're listening to me now, you're probably thinking, I don't know, man. I'm gonna go back and read later. I'm pretty sure the shepherds followed a star, at least one, right? I don't know. I'm pretty sure there were three wise men. I'm gonna have to go take a look. And you're probably like, I've seen a dozen Christmas plays in all the movies. There is for sure an innkeeper. David, go read your Bible, is probably what you're thinking. Because when we carry these misconceptions, when we carry this way of reading the story or a way of remembering a story for a long, long time, it can be a real challenge to hear something different, to hear that maybe we've been remembering it slightly off. Maybe something's a little bit off with our recollection or the way we've been retelling this story. Well, welcome to Abundant Life Church. My name is David. I'm one of the pastors here at ALC. And last week, we started our Christmas series called A Perfectly Messy Christmas. And this is an opportunity for us as a church family to realize that our perfect pursuit of Christmas, right, that perfect Christmas party or Christmas dinner, that perfectly wrapped present, that perfect turkey, ham, roast beef, whatever you do, has to be just right. But we all know that Christmas is a bit of a mess, That no matter how we prepare, no matter how much we get ready to have everyone over or to go and have a lovely time, there's always a little bit of mess to our Christmas season, and maybe that's okay. In fact, maybe that actually gets to the very heart of Christmas. Because as we talked about last week, there would be no Christmas if you and I were not such a mess. In John 3:16 and 17, we read, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him." See, Jesus stepped into our mess. And that's what we're talking about as we lead up to Christmas Eve services, to celebrating Jesus coming into the world. He came into our mess for a variety of reasons. And today, we're talking about Jesus coming to reveal who God truly is. If you're reading along with me, if you have a Bible or an app you're scrolling through with your Bible on it, we're gonna be in Colossians chapter 1. So you can join me there. We're gonna be there in just a minute. Well, most of us have wrestled in one way or another with our idea or our conception of who God is at one point or another. Maybe you think or you have thought that God is kind of a Santa Claus-like figure, right? Got the big belly, got the really long white beard, perpetually joyful all the time, ready to hear our requests and give us what we ask for, right? Maybe you thought of God more like a police officer or a judge, where you're like, most of the time, if I'm coming in front of this person, something's gone wrong, right? That's usually what we hear of, oh, I'm in trouble. I need to ask God for help. I'm in trouble. God's gonna be mad at me. Whatever that looks like, God is here to lay down the judgment. Maybe you picture Morgan Freeman. Actually, a lot of us probably picture Morgan Freeman. Or maybe the big face in the sky from Monty Python of God giving his commands or instructions. Maybe it's another godly figure from a movie or a TV show. But whatever your picture currently is, I'd be willing to bet that it has shifted and changed over time. And I'd be willing to bet that it's going to continue to grow and shift over time as we all learn more and more of who God is. See, for many of us, the pursuit of learning more about God and who God is a complicated and challenging journey with lots of ups, lots of downs. Some of us have had to unlearn some really harmful theologies that have been taught to us over the years. And some of us, many of us, have had incredible teachers, mentors, and friends help us along that journey as we learn more of who God is. And all of us have more to discover. So before we get to our text today, I want to just briefly read through a story about a woman who had her view of God radically changed by Jesus. See, Jesus had struck up a conversation with a Samaritan woman and had just finished telling her some details about her life that she didn't think anyone knew about, especially just somebody wandering through town. And she responds this way in John chapter 4, starting in verse 19. "Sir," the woman said, "you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim that it is here at Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshiped?" See, her response is kind of like, you seem to know quite a bit. So let's settle this debate right here and right now. The Jews claim that you can only worship at the temple in Jerusalem, where David brought the Ark of the Covenant. But my ancestors say that you can only worship on Mount Gerizim, where Moses, name drop, commanded our ancestors to worship, our ancestors, the Israelites. So which one is it? We both have really good arguments. And the only thing that we Samaritans and you Jews agree on is there is only one place to encounter God. So which one is it? This is a really important question. Because if there's only one place you can meet God, you better get the address right? It's a big deal. But Jesus responds, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, but while we Jews know all about him, for salvation comes through the Jews. But the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way, for God is spirit. So those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. See, according to Jesus, both the Jews and the Samaritans have it wrong. God has never been limited to one space. God is spirit. It's not God is now spirit or God has been spirit. God is spirit, and spirits don't have addresses as much as like ghost movies will have you think. Spirits do not have addresses. They're not limited to a space. Notice it's not God here that's doing any changing. It's people. It's the time is coming where it won't matter where you worship, whether you worship on the mountain or at the temple. The time is coming where true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth. God isn't changing. God has always been spirit. It wasn't God who needed an address to meet with people. It was people who needed an address to meet with God. And the time is coming where they won't need an address anymore. But the woman isn't satisfied with Jesus's answer. Just like most of Jesus's answers, it's a bit vague and doesn't give her quite the answer she was looking for. So she responds like this: I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called the Christ, and when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. I love this. It's kind of like, you know what? I appreciate your time, whoever you are, but the Messiah is gonna be here any minute. I'm just gonna wait and he'll tell us what's up. Because what she is after is an answer to this debate, and that's where she's focused on, this conversation with the Messiah. But Jesus tells her, I am the Messiah. And just then, his disciples came back, and they were shocked to find him talking with a woman. But none of them had the nerve to ask, what do you want with her? Or why are you talking to her? The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see the man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So the people came streaming from the village to see him. See, this woman had some misconceptions about God. Her whole life, she had heard these arguments about God's address. Notice when she thinks she has a prophet in front of her that could answer things about God, the very first thing that comes to mind, tell me, is it the temple or the mountain? I gotta know. Like, this is top of mind. Where is the right place to worship God? Where does God actually come to meet with people? These are the important questions. And it also seems like she thought one of the main reasons the Messiah was coming was to settle a debate, to declare a winner. Either the Samaritans have it right or the Jews have it right. Which one is it? And Jesus tells her the messiness of this debate is getting in the way of people actually encountering God. God is spirit and is calling people to worship in spirit and in truth. For this woman, the Messiah is right in front of you. But your first question is about, what's the address? Where do I go? See, messes get in the way of relationships. How many of you have been in an argument with your spouse? Never, right? Never. An argument with your spouse that goes on for so long and becomes so complicated and spirals to the point that you're both livid. You're both so upset and neither of you can remember what you were talking about. Anybody? Yeah, okay, we're not being honest. That's how we're doing it this morning, okay. But we get to that point where it's about this, and now we're talking about this, and somehow we got to talking about this, and how do we ever get back on track? Or maybe you realize you haven't heard from a friend in a long time, and you start kind of thinking, why haven't they talked to me? Why haven't I heard from them? And it turns out that you said something or did something a while ago that really hurt or offended them, and now they've been avoiding you, and you didn't know. And now you're thinking, how do I make this right? See, we offend one another, we misunderstand each other, we hurt one another, and we get stuck in these interpersonal messes and can't figure our way out. And we've all probably learned the hard way that there's one surefire way to stay in that mess, and that is to plant our flag on the hill of rightness. right? If I can just prove that I'm right, things will be okay. And that is never, ever the case, because friendships can't begin to heal until somebody goes, you know what? I was a bit wrong and I'm sorry. How can I make it right? Marriages don't begin to mend until one of the couple is able to say, you know what, I was a little bit in the wrong, right? It's never, ever gonna mend while we're both waiting for the other to announce how wrong they were, because that is never going to happen for both of us. Elevating rightness above everything else keeps us in the mess. It keeps us right where we are. We get stuck in this mess in our friendships, in our relationships with our kids, with our marriages, but we also can get stuck in our relationship with God. The Israelites and the Samaritans were hung up on the right way to connect with God. How do I actually approach God? What's the address? They're also talking about where do we sacrifice? How do we sacrifice? What do we sacrifice? And while we may think, oh, that's nice that that's way in the past and we don't talk about that anymore, later the church would have similar debates. What can we eat? Like, what's okay to eat? There's entire chapters of the Bible dedicated to what can we eat. Who gets to take communion first? Believe it or not, an actual debate in the early church. Who's first in line for communion? What's the deal with spiritual gifts? Like, how do we get over that together? How do we move forward together? And then we still have messes today. Churches are still having conversations about how do we dress on a Sunday morning? Like, that's a really big deal. What kind of music should we sing to together? That's a big deal. But these messes, these debates, these conversations can get in the way of our relationships with one another and from seeing how God is moving in our midst. Just like the Samaritan woman, we can get so caught up in messes and debates that we miss the Messiah in front of us. See, everything changes when you encounter Jesus. That's what we learned in the story of the Samaritan woman. But after Jesus had died and risen and ascended, the church began to grow. Not just because people were learning more or were getting a bit more right about who God was. It was because they were encountering Jesus. Paul wrote a letter to the church in Colossae. It was a pretty challenging letter of encouragement and really correction, reminding them of their first encounter with Jesus, rising above their messy debates and pointing them back to Jesus. And we read this in Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 3. We always pray for you, and we give thanks to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, for we have heard of your faith in Christ Jesus and your love for all of God's people, which come from your confident hope of what God has reserved for you in heaven. You have had this expectation ever since you first heard the truth of the good news. This same good news that came to you is going out all over the world, and hear this. It is bearing fruit everywhere by changing lives, just as it changed your lives from the day you first heard and understood the truth about God's wonderful grace. We talked about this last week, right? Like the gospel of Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of what people have been waiting for, this promise that God had given to Abraham that his family, through his family, all peoples of the world would be blessed. And now we see that promise beginning to be fulfilled. And it's a revelation of what God is truly like, not just for the people of Israel, not just for the Jews and the Samaritans. It's bearing fruit everywhere. See, before God was invisible to everyone, but now there's people who have seen God, who have eaten next to God, who have walked with God, who have heard God teach, who have seen God cry, who watched God die and come back to life. The invisible God has become visible, or as it says in Colossians 1:15, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. See, there's no better way for you and I to understand the nature, the character, the mystery of God than for us to look at Jesus Christ, who Jesus is. Not just a good teacher, not just a moral guy or a cool guy to kind of look up to. No, Jesus, who is truly God, or as we read in Hebrews, the Son radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God. And he sustains everything by the mighty power of his command. Or as Pastor Brian Zond put it, God is like Jesus. God has always been like Jesus. There has never been a time when God was not like Jesus. We have not always known what God is like, but now we do. See, Jesus is why we no longer need an address to meet with God, to approach God. The God who is spirit lived a human life, was encountered by people, dwelt among us so that we could personally encounter God, so that we could recognize what God is truly like, the invisible made visible. As we continue in verse 22, yet now he has reconciled you to himself through the death of Christ in his physical body. As a result, he has brought you into his own presence, and you are holy and blameless as you stand before him without a single fault. See, church, God didn't need to come and dwell amongst us. We needed him. We needed God to approach us. That's why we've been saying this whole time, this whole series, that you and I are the reason for the season. That Jesus came to invite us into his family, into what he's doing in the world, into what he is going to do in the world around us. I just want to make 3 statements about Christmas this morning. First, Christmas is the celebration of God moving toward his people. Not to settle a debate, not changing who he is, but giving a clearer glimpse of himself, revealing what he is like so our lives can be changed, so that we can see the visible God, the invisible God made visible, and begin to live like that. Second, Christmas is the celebration of God entering our mess. My faith does not demand me to be perfect to experience the presence of God. But my faith invites me to experience the perfect, unconditional love of God through Jesus, who entered our mess, who entered the messy world. And third, Christmas is the celebration of God revealing who he truly is. As we read in that famous Christmas verse, Matthew 1:23, look, the virgin will conceive a child, she will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. See, I recognize that some of us, probably many of us, are in kind of a mess in our relationship with God. That maybe you're obsessed with just, I gotta get things right. I'm going to every Bible study, I'm reading every book, I've got to get God right. Or maybe you're holding on to a particular view of God so tightly that it's starting to cause tension with your relationship with God and with the people around you. That I've got to have this right. If I don't have this right, I don't know what I'm doing. It might be time to just pause and take a breath and recognize that God is moving towards you. That God isn't calling you to claw your way to him, that it's only if you get things perfect that he's gonna meet you there. Now, God through Jesus has already met us there. Consider whether your pursuit of God, whether your pursuit of Jesus is drawing you closer to him and closer to others, or pushing others away, including God himself. Maybe you don't quite know what to think of God or even where to start. Like you've heard so many ideas about God, you've heard all the debates, and you don't really want to step into that. It's too much. And I want to invite you to get to know the God who's revealed in Jesus. The God who has always been like Jesus. mean, there's so much to discover about God, but it begins with the particular truth that God is revealed in Jesus, who lived a selfless life, who died an innocent death, and rose to new life so that we could experience new life in him. So if you're experiencing messiness in your relationship with God, maybe you're holding on so tight, or you don't know that this is something you want to grab onto yet, I want to invite you to join me in prayer. We're gonna pray about that messiness, because I believe God wants to meet us right there, wherever you're at. Would you bow and pray with me? God, I thank you that you come to meet us. God, that you come into our space, that you came into our messy world. God, that you came in a story, in the Christmas story, that just seems so messy. It seems so unbefitting of a God or even a king. But God, you came in such a humble way and lived such a humble life, engaged with everyday people, like a Samaritan woman just going about her business. And as people encountered you, their lives were dramatically changed. Whether they'd been following God for a long time or whether they'd never heard any of this before. And God, we know that today you're still meeting us in that same way. God, I pray for those who are holding on so tight, who have just thought of you in such a particular way for so long, and it's created walls between them and you. It's created walls between them and other people. God, I pray that you would break those walls down, that you would encounter us in a fresh way. God, that you would show us that regardless of where we are, regardless of what we know or think we know, there is so much more to you to experience, to know, to love. And God, for those of us who haven't even stepped in yet, who maybe look at this whole Christianity thing like, man, they can't seem to figure it out. How am I supposed to figure it out? God, I pray that you would reveal yourself in such a simple way. God, in the same way we read that you encountered people in your time on earth to just step in and say, I am the Messiah. Would you follow me? So God, if that's someone sitting in this room, I pray that you would meet them right where they're at. And let's just start there. Regardless of what the journey looks like moving forward, and there will be ups and downs, we're gonna start with Jesus, who lived and died and rose again and is calling me to new life. God, would each of us recognize new life in you this morning? In Jesus' name, amen.